All right, welcome to the Lovecraft eZine talk show, podcast, videocast. Today is March the 20th, 2016, and prizes. We're all really happy because Kelly Young has a new microphone and is able to stay with us today, I think.
Fingers crossed.
Prizes. For those listening now or later on this week, we're going to give away Dennis Wheeler from Fedogan and Bremer. Sent me an email a few days ago and has a few books to give away. Weird Shadows over Innsmouth. Weirder Shadows over Innsmouth.
Great book.
And Awaiting Strange Gods, Daryl Schweitzer collection.
Also good.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, those are all hardcovers, and those are great prizes. So, if you're listening in between live and/or this week, anytime between now and next Sunday, you can have a chance to win those. All right. So, for the benefit of those listening later, can we all introduce ourselves real quick? Start with Kelly.
I'm Kelly Young. I am the executive editor of Strange Eons magazine.
Matt.
I'm Matt Carpenter. I edited A Lonely and Curious Country, the best darn book you ever read.
I was not aware that you had edited a book. Why have you not told us about this before? Rick.
I am Rick Lay. I've written pulp fiction about vigilante heroes and Lovecraftian monsters.
And Salome.
I'm Salome Jones, and I've edited some anthologies like Cthulhu Lives and Cthulhu Lies Dreaming.
And then, last but not least, our guest today is Paul Tremblay. Hey, Paul.
Hey, so I'm Paul Tremblay. I'm the author of Head Full of Ghosts and the forthcoming Disappearance at Devil's Rock. I've never won a prize, so I'm hoping that I'll win a book at the end of this.
You've never won a prize?
Well, short of like
That's
serial
a prize
prizes,
for you.
really.
Yeah, do you have one of those to give away? Maybe Paul would like one of those.
What is that? It's beautiful.
It's A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. So without spoilers, of course, can you tell the audience a little bit about A Head Full of Ghosts?
Sure. So, I don't know, for a while I sort of obnoxiously called it my postmodern secular exorcism novel. And it sort of sounds like a joke, but when I first had the idea for it, that's sort of what I had in mind as I went. The story opens with a best-selling author is interviewing a woman named Mary. And Mary is 23 years old right now. And actually, that's when I say right now, she's 23 years old, 15 years in the future, approximately.
Right.
So when she was 8, 15 years prior, her sister Marjorie, her older sister Marjorie, was either going through a psychotic break, suffering from schizophrenia, or she was possessed. And much of the book is told from Mary remembering what had happened to her sister and her family, including a reality TV show that came in to document everything. And then it's fun for the whole family from there.
And everyone learns an important lesson about life and possession.
Absolutely.
Kelly and Matt, why are you guys muted? You guys expect me to do this interview all by myself, I think.
You yell at me when
Eagles were going crazy over here, so I didn't want to
the Eagles, okay.
whenever I'm unmuted, you send me mails. Matt, mute yourself.
Oh, only when you're typing on the keyboard. That's when I tell you to mute yourself. What was the genesis of the book, Paul? How did the book start?
It was funny. It was one of those, for me, like a rare sort of eureka moment, sort of, because I was 100 pages deep into another novel that I was going to call Charles Manson Doesn't Answer My Letters, which is still a pretty cool title. I might have to do something with that someday. But the book was going to be about an 8th grader who was trying to end the world to help, he wasn't an awful kid. He actually felt bad for humanity, wanted to put them out of their misery. And there was going to be, toward the end, some sort of fun connection to Cthulhu and Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really slow going. I'd spent really almost a year on it and only gotten 100 pages in. And I was spending more and more of my time just actually doing research, reading different apocalyptic ideas and scenarios. And I happened to stumble across Centipede Press's book, The Exorcist, from their Studies in the Night film series. and I started reading all these, interviews and essays about the movie The Exorcist, and there were some essays particularly about sort of the politics of the film and some of the deeper meanings of the film, which I hadn't read before. It just started really getting me going, and it made me pause. It's like, huh. I actually thought about the market for a second, which I never do, and I felt like, people have, there's certainly been a literary update of the zombie. There's been literary updates of the werewolf, quite a few werewolf novels recently.
Right.
The vampire is always around. And sort of Lovecraft fiction has been everywhere too. It's like I felt like no one's really done a possession novel, at least that I could think, in quite a while. I mean, Hollywood keeps pumping out the PG-13 movies, which I'm really not a fan of. So I started thinking, how would I approach an Exorcist story? And I just started with the idea of the two sisters, and I really wanted to play it as almost as straight as I possibly could in terms of whether or not she was possessed. I wanted to try to be as realistic as possible, sort of with my own sort of skeptical, secular brain.
Yeah. I got that sense. I mean, I don't know you. I'm just getting to know you, but I got that sense that your mind works that way just from reading the novel. So, how did that kid want to end the world? Did he come up with an actual plan? I'm sorry,
No,
I'm going back to that plot for a second.
I didn't actually get that far. I had in mind that there might be like he tries all these sort of quasi-realistic endings, but he discovers Lovecraft, and I was going to sort of go in that direction. And I was actually going to have like Nick Mamatas was going to be a character, and some other my writer friends were going to be characters, but I put that away. And it seems like Nick has already written that novel anyway with his I Am Providence coming out later this year.
Yeah, that's right. I noticed there's a teacher, if I remember right, by the name of Stephen Graham Jones in A Head Full of Ghosts.
There is, yes.
He insists on being called Stephen Graham Jones in the book.
Stephen is a great friend and a great writer, and it's funny that I've known him for a while. Him and his son have come over to my house, and we know each other really well. But it's still like I just can't call him Stephen when I'm talking to other people. It's always, "Hey, Stephen Graham Jones is here." Or, "I was talking to Stephen Graham Jones." If I say Stephen, they're like, "Who?" So yeah, it just sort of rolls off the tongue. And I enjoyed that I made him skinny and not physically attractive looking.
And what was his reaction?
He got a kick out of it, because when you are, as gorgeously handsome as he is, I don't think you can be upset by fictionalized shots at you.
In the book, the Barrett family, they become the stars of this reality show, and especially the dad sort of leaps at the chance because he's been laid off. They're really hurting for money. They're eating pasta for dinner every night. What made you go that direction, incorporating the reality show into the story, or a major part of the story?
So when I first started, having the idea for the book, the idea of having a reality show involved certainly occurred to me right away. And I think a big part of it was to help just sort of muddy the is it real or is it not real tone for the whole book. Because I really wanted to try to pile on as much as I could to make the narrator as unreliable as possible. And not necessarily, it's not that the narrator is being purposefully unreliable, but I wanted to have not only her memories as an 8-year-old being 15 years old, but also to have this have this TV show that she lived through, and also that she has a record of, like she can go back and still watch it, and that sort of messes with her head, and hopefully mess in a good way, help mess with the reader's perception of what was real, what wasn't real. I thought it was nice to have that juxtaposition of the reality show sort of encroaching upon the family and making them do things they necessarily wouldn't have done, to again help build the cases of is something supernatural going on, is something not supernatural going on.
Right. Yeah.
You also gave the narrator two voices and, in a sense, two identities. You have the blog in the future and
Right.
modern day.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the blog was the most fun I've had as a writer, like writing that blog, which is sort of funny because going into it, we talked off air earlier about how I teach math, and I have a math degree. I don't have an English degree, and sort of my lack of critical studies or lack of English major at times, I feel very self-conscious about that. But at the same time, it drives me. So anyway, usually when I write nonfiction, I just really sweat over it. I hate doing it. Interviews and essays take me so long to write, and I just don't, and I feel very self-conscious about it. So I thought the blog posts were going to be hard, but in a way they were just sort of freeing, to be like this other voice, and to get a chance to. I think it'd be fun for every novelist to have the chance to be able to, hey, I'm taking all these influences, and then to be able to point out those influences. I mean, it felt very freeing to be able to do that.
It almost reads like a bit of a stream of consciousness. Did you write it that way? Did it feel that way when you wrote it?
Yeah, a little bit.
The blog post, I mean.
Right. Yeah, no, a little bit, definitely. I mean, I felt like I certainly connected with the voice, and I actually borrowed the voice a little bit. The name of the blogger in the book is Karen Brissett, and there is a real Karen Brissett. She's one of the top reviewers at Goodreads. And Karen's reviews are a little bit in that style. I mean, I couldn't copy her totally exactly, but she has sort of a fun, I don't know, sort of laid back style, but at the same time she's very smart and she's able to get into a lot of books that she reads in depth. So, I certainly asked her, I told her I was planning on doing this, and she gave me, tacit permission to do so. Yeah, did I answer the question?
I think so. Matt, I'm sorry. You had a question, didn't you?
I wanted to kind of sidestep for a little bit because I looked over your bibliography, and while you've been writing for a while, you haven't been writing extensively in fiction, it seems to me. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into writing and where you're going to go, and maybe who or what your influences are. We're always also interested in hearing when you first discovered Lovecraft and whether you sort of want to go a completely different direction, or you may revisit that kind of fiction.
Yeah, so I feel like every writer has sort of a different start, and I feel like mine's different than most, where I wasn't writing as a kid, and I wasn't writing in college. I got a math degree. My undergraduate degree was a double major, math and humanities, and I took a English class my second semester senior year. And in that class, I remember reading Joyce Carol Oates' "Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been?" And reading that story to me was just like, I don't know, it was almost like one of those literal, oh my God moments. I didn't realize people wrote stuff like this. I mean, that story totally kicked my butt and woke me up. And at the same time, I just started dating my wife. She was my wife then, obviously, but and she bought me Stephen King's A Stand for my birthday. So then I read that, and I was totally hooked. So I spent the next 2 years when I was up in graduate school reading all the Stephen King books that I could find, and I went from Stephen King to Peter Straub and more Joyce Carol Oates and Clive Barker, and just sort of weaved my way through, I guess, the rest of the horror genre, as well as a bunch of other writers as well, like Kurt Vonnegut. I'm a huge fan of Kurt Vonnegut's work. Shirley Jackson, of course. So the end result was when I got my math degree 2 years later, I emerged from graduate school for the first time, in love with reading. I just wanted to read all the time. And I had this weird little itch to try to write a short story. And I wanted to be in a punk band, but I wasn't a very good musician. So I quickly found out I was potentially a better writer than a musician. So I don't know, I sort of messed around for a few years. I sold my first short stories in the year 2000. I sort of kept going with it. I wrote a book called Phobia. It was the first novel that I wrote a trunk novel, but Phobia was a novel that I'd completed and actually got an agent with in 2006. And Phobia is actually a mainstream comedy, sort of, I don't know, Confederacy of Dunces in Boston. Not that the book was as good as Confederacy of Dunces in no way, just that it was sort of like a screwball, plotless comedy. So for a while, it was almost like all my short fiction was completely horror, but my longer stuff tended to be more humorous, which I don't know what that meant to me. I didn't try to overanalyze it too much. The first novel that I sold was called The Little Sleep, and it features a narcoleptic private detective in South Boston, which sounds kind of goofy, and it is. It's funny, but also it's a pretty dark book too. I used to tell people that I wrote that with a horror attitude. And to me, that meant that anything could happen. Particularly anything dark could happen. So another reason why I wanted to write A Head Full of Ghosts is because I'd spent all these years writing horror short stories, but I'd never really written anything horror novel length. So I was very excited and happy to be able to complete that. So going forward, I have Disappearance of Devil's Rock coming out this summer. I have props.
Awesome.
Ah. So that's the
That's
arc.
coming out June 20th, if I remember right.
Yeah,
Is
yep,
that right?
yeah, June 21st, I think.
Okay.
So after that, it was a 2-book deal, so I'm in the midst of writing I've written like a summary for my next novel, and I'm trying to write a couple of chapters, and we're going to pitch that to my editor to hopefully get back on deal with another couple of books. And hopefully one of the books being a short story collection. I've already talked to my editor, and she seems to be, excited about it, so.
It sounds like you essentially started reading horror when you were in college. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, I started, becoming a reader in, late college and even grad school. But all growing up, I was a huge fan of horror movies. I don't know if any of you from the New England area, but we had one of our UHF stations. Jesus, that's showing how old I am. Channel 56. There was a show on Saturdays called Creature Double Feature. So every Saturday they would show 2 movies back to back, and one was usually, a Japanese monster movie, and the second one would be a Hammer film or a black and white, 50s B movie, and I was totally hooked on watching those. And I was always terrified as a kid. I mean, I would watch them from under like the coffee table, from between my fingers. So horror movies were, to me, my sort of gateway into it first before I became a reader later.
Rick's smiling because he's smiling and nodding his head here.
Yeah, creature. Every state seems to have
A Creature Double
some
Feature.
show that has a name like Creature Features.
Yeah, so as far as I didn't answer the Lovecraft part of it. As far as Lovecraft goes, it's funny. I've definitely read a bunch of him, and I've become more interested in his work as I'm getting older, and as actually more of my friends are quote unquote Lovecraftian writers. I hope it's not too blasphemous to say I kind of like other people's sort of updated Lovecraftian fiction more than I like Lovecraft himself. But
Yeah, a lot of people
it's
feel that
around
way.
everywhere. Yeah, I mean, it certainly creeped in. Obviously, I threw a little bit of Lovecraftian stuff into a head full of ghosts, even. Just a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not surprising because liking the updated cosmic horror as opposed to what was written in the 20s or so, because, back then he was writing in the present age, and when you're reading a story set, then maybe part of me thinks that makes it more scary. It makes it this subliminal, actually could happen
Right.
type of feeling. So, yeah.
No, but I still enjoy Call of Cthulhu quite a bit. I actually purchased the the silent movie that was made fairly recently.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Yeah.
And I'll show you the slipper that I have on right now. So.
Oh my God! He's the first guest that wears Cthulhu slippers.
You also have to explain what's that little alien thing on your thermostat behind you.
I know. Well, I've been kicked out of what's usually my office, so I was like, I'm just in my bedroom with like a bare wall, so I was just trying to throw a little something, a little eye candy in there.
What is it? What is it?
It's just like a little green eraser alien. Can I reach it without falling off my temporary desk? I think my daughter gave this to me.
I
I
tried
could
to
have
tell
more
you that.
obvious and drink my tea out of my alien mug.
Oh, nice.
Well, the Cthulhu slippers were not a requirement for coming on the show, so.
Oh, that's okay. No, they're very comfortable. And actually, they look a lot to me like the Smog Monster almost from Godzilla versus the Smog Monster.
So you mentioned Stephen King. Do you have a particular favorite Stephen King? What are some of your favorites of his stuff?
Well, I'll certainly never forget reading The Stand because it was the first thing that I'd ever read of his. I think his best novel is Bag of Bones. And one of his best, more fairly recent novels. I believe that came out in like '93 or '94 or something like that. And I still love his short stories. His most recent short story collection, there's 5 or 6 stories in there that are really, really excellent stuff.
Bizarre, Bad Dreams.
So I'm still yes, yeah.
You sort of almost referenced Bag of Bones in your novel, because you talked about a concept which I believe you traced it to Vladimir Nabokov, that a ghost may actually be a demon, which in King's novel was a sort of something from outside merged with the dead spirit of a woman, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yeah, geez, I hadn't even thought of that. But you're right. You're totally right. The thing, and with the Bag of Bones, it still sticks with me. What I think is one of his best written scenes is the scene, without giving too much away, where you're in the point of view of one of the characters, and you're going with them, and then you realize that that character is about to try to attempt to drown somebody in the bathtub, and the way he sets it up is just so masterfully done. Like, you realize, oh my God, this is going to happen. Sean Stewart does something similar in Perfect Circle. I don't know if you guys have ever read Perfect Circle, but that's an excellent a more recent ghost novel as well.
Did you like the adaptation of Bag of Bones?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, was it a miniseries?
It was a miniseries with Pierce Brosnan. I
didn't see it.
What was I going to ask? Oh, what about Duma Key? That's one of my favorites.
I haven't read Duma Key.
Oh, I think you'd enjoy it. Are you a fan of reality shows or no?
No. I mean, sometimes I watch like guilty pleasure. Like, I used to watch Survivor because it was more like a competition thing. But a lot of the reality shows that were mentioned in the book are sort of more, I don't know, the faux scientific, harmless ones that I would watch with my daughter because she liked watching Finding Bigfoot, and we would have playful arguments about whether or not Bigfoot is real or not. So
right.
Some of those we used to watch together, but it wasn't something like I actively tuned into to see every day, just every other day.
There are those kinds of pseudoscientific reality shows which I think done right can be fun to watch, and then there are the ones like the Kardashians, then Mob Wives and things like that just I actively dislike, and I think your book made me dislike them even more.
It was a macabre version of those shows.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely don't like those shows. And, knowing that I was going to have a reality show in a book, I also knew that was like not an easy way to get the reader on my side, but I think most readers going into it have a negative view of what reality shows are, and obviously would think that reality shows aren't real reality. But it does interest me, just the idea of how that affects us, how everyone is attempting to become a star, and like how social media, sort of changes the way we view things. I wanted to try to jam that all in there.
Yeah, that leads into my next question, which is I've read a few other interviews that you've given where you talk about this idea of your concern or your fear of the information age versus the disinformation age. And can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can continue to talk about how old we are. I think all of us here remember possibly, when there was no internet. I remember thinking about it, and even being in graduate school in like 1994, 1995, and seeing sort of the first people actually using email and stuff like that was just kind of crazy. And the idea that we'll just be able to share all this information, which clearly we get to do, and obviously, the internet has changed the world in ways that are amazing and almost hard to enumerate. But at the same time, I think there was this at least unanticipated to me, how easily it is to manipulate information or purposely give misinformation and present it as real. I mean, I just have a hard time understanding like how some people can believe conspiracy X, or without getting too heavy into politics, what some people believe, what they believe, when clear evidence that what they're reading off of their favorite website is not true, or at least, if not false, completely slanted in one direction or the other. And so it sort of terrifies me. It's like, I don't know how we get that genie back in the bottle, for a lack of better expression. I think it certainly impacted sort of how how split people are on the political spectrum in the United States, and how angry everyone is.
Yeah, that's true. More split than ever before.
It certainly feels like, and I feel like every age probably feels like that. But man, I mean, it certainly feels like it's it's never been sort of as bad as it is right now, at least in the United States.
And there's always been a version of ourselves, before the internet that we present to the world, and this version of ourselves that's maybe the real thing, but it seems now today that's just far more blatant with social media.
Right.
My wife, like I said, she's a teacher. She knows this principal that just got fired from school in another town, it was actually let out of the school by security. I don't know what the hell she did that merit that kind of. But she said, you know, you check her Facebook wall, everything's just great, everything's hunky dory.
Yeah.
You know, so disappearance. What's the title of the next book again?
Disappearance at Devil's Rock. It's Hardy Boys fan fiction. I'm just kidding. Again, only people of a certain age are going to recognize that Hardy Boys reference. But yeah, so it opens with a young 40-year-old single mother gets a phone call in the middle of the night. Her 13-year-old son, Tommy, has essentially gone missing. Tommy and his two friends were at a sleepover. They snuck out in the middle of the night to go to a local state park. It's a sizable state park. And he just disappeared, didn't come back with his friends, and so the novel sort of takes off from there.
Well, so I haven't read that one yet, obviously, since it's not out yet, but it seems there's a little bit of a common theme with both books, these two recent books, where children in danger or going through something horrible.
Yeah, it's funny, I had a point, even with like a lot of my fiction, once my first child was born, I was writing. That was really when I was getting into writing, and I had a friend point out to me, he's like, geez, you've written like 20 whatever short stories, and a lot of these are really, there's this theme of of kids or parents and going through your fiction. I hadn't even realized it. I mean, it's totally obvious to me now. It's something I continually go to or return to because it's it interests me. In a lot of ways, it's one of the few universal things that we all have in common. That we've all been somebody's child. Even if you haven't been, even if you're not a parent yourself, all of us remember what it was like to be a kid or a teenager. Or remember, how both exhilarating and terrifying it is to be a kid. I don't know. Since I've been a teacher, I've been around kids my whole life. It's just something I'm interested in. And I continually go back to.
What are some of your influences? Talk about that as a writer.
Yeah. So, geez. I don't know. I feel like I love to grab influence from just about everything and anything. Movies, books. I mean, so Stephen King was the reason why I fell in love with reading. Mm-hmm. Also Peter Straub and Clive Barker. I feel like reading Kurt Vonnegut and early Chuck Palahniuk also sort of shaped my writing because when I first started writing, I wore the idea that I'd be a horror writer as a badge. Like, I'm a horror writer. That's what I am. That's all that's all I want to be. With no like negative connotations there. But it also meant that I was taking every story idea that I had and trying to force it into a horror fiction slot.
Yeah.
Or other non-horror writers like Vonnegut and Chuck Palahniuk and sort of going out from there as well. I said, okay, I can be a writer who sometimes write horror. Like it's okay for me if I have a story that isn't a horror story. To write that, and I'm glad I did because I never would have come up with the idea for The Little Sleep, the two detective novels that I sold. I've written like a strange sort of science fiction-y post-apocalyptic thing. I think everybody has to write a science fiction post-apocalyptic dystopian novel at some point in their lives. It's in the contract. But I'm very happy to be writing horror, dark fiction at the moment, and that's probably what I'll be doing for the foreseeable future. I definitely feel the most comfortable there now. But at the same time, I think the book that I'm working on now is going to try to mix a little bit of horror with a little bit of satire and humor, which hopefully will work because this last book was pretty depressing. But it's a great read, trust me.
I'm kind of wondering, like, we've talked about it before. It's like one of the unwritten rules in the United States for horror movies is that you don't show something bad happening to a kid. So the 8-year-old can skip across a plane full of meat-eating dinosaurs and be fine, while an old hag of a stewardess gets eaten. That doesn't exist so much in Europe. It doesn't exist so much in books. But I've noticed, at least this is the only book of yours that I've read, and you didn't really shy away from putting her in the midst of the bad things that were happening, including like physical risk of harm. So I just find that interesting too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely didn't want to shy away from that without being gratuitous, I guess. I mean, like, I don't know if any of you have watched The Walking Dead, but, I think almost any subject can be handled as long as it's sort of handled to be important to the story. Like, I would give an example, actually, maybe like a month ago, there was a child on The Walking Dead who was eaten, like, full on screen by a zombie. Like, you see, a zombie actually bite into the kid's head, etc. It was pretty graphic and gruesome. Um, and ultimately, I was like, it seemed really forced. It just seemed like there to be shock, as opposed to actually having sort of an emotional import to the story. So, I would hope not just kids, but for any sort of characters that I, do put in danger with violence, that I guess that I would treat it with the weight that it deserves. But oh yeah, put the kids in trouble. I mean, you have to be a little bit careful because you will get people react to say, oh, that you're just doing that because it's an easy way to get like a reaction or a shock or a scare. But hopefully, if you treat the kids as real humans, with their own fears, their own set of motivations and reasons for having that take place in the story, people aren't turned off by it.
Rick, yeah, go ahead, Rick. I was about to say, I know you have some questions.
To get back to influences, I thought of Henry James's Turn of the Screw when I read your book, A Head Full of Ghosts. Was that conscious on your part, or was that just Peter Straub who's influenced by James coming through?
I would say it's definitely more Peter Straub, because I would have to admit, part of my reading hole. I mean, I've done what I can. Like I said, I got a late start on reading. Really wasn't a big reader until my early to mid 20s. I actually haven't read any Henry James, but I have read all of Peter Straub. So I do have to correct that at some point. I don't know if that's going to be in the near future because I'm happy to have the success of A Head Full of Ghosts, but everyone in their book writing cousin have been sending me requests to read their books for them.
Oh, really?
So the short answer is no. I'm sorry, I haven't read Henry James. I've read a lot of John Langan though, and I know John has read and is a big fan of Henry James.
But it had just so viewers know what I'm alluding to. Is James has the ambiguity of whether is it real or somebody's imagination.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's one of my favorite sort of, if you want to call it a trope in horror, but I'm definitely drawn towards that idea. Especially maybe that's the one part of my math brain that sneaks into my fiction is I have a hard time like, would that really happen? Like my head's always asking, would this supernatural thing really be there? So I'm definitely drawn to the idea of the ambiguous, to me being like the scariest thing. Like you don't know what it is, or was this actually real? What does that say about our own reality? To me, that's like an everyday frightening thing.
Yeah, I'm very much drawn to that as well. What are some of the, you mentioned John Langan, Peter Straub, what are some other books, movies, whatever you want to talk about that employ that trope that you've enjoyed, that you're a big fan of?
A movie off the top of my head is one of my favorite movies in the last 10 years, and it was definitely an influence on the book that's coming out next. It's called Lake Mungo. It's an Australian movie. Mm-hmm. It's a very quiet, faux documentary about a 13-year-old girl who drowns in a pond in Australia, and the whole movie is really about the aftermath of her family dealing with the grief. And then there's some potential weirdness that occurs that they discover during the weeks after her death, and it's just such a wonderfully sad, melancholy movie. And there's one scene in it that, to me, because I was so into it and I was watching it by myself at night, there was one scene that I had to detach from the movie, that it was so scary to me that I couldn't deal with it. I had to take out my cell phone because I knew what was happening. I just had to look at something else, not the screen. So
that's an effective movie.
That's one of my favorite movies. I actually own 2 copies of the DVD, one to lend to people and one to keep for myself.
Wow.
And it's called Lake Mungo. I'm gonna have to check that out. So, Lake Mungo, right?
Yeah, I've heard of this, and I keep hearing that I'm supposed to watch it, and I keep forgetting, so I wrote it down now.
Put it on the message board, Mike.
Oh, okay. Thanks. So, Paul, speaking of Stephen King, he tweeted about the book last year about a head full of ghosts. How'd that feel? What were you doing that day? And
Oh, it was amazing. Oh, you mean August 18th, 2015?
well, I mean, if you remember it, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so I knew that like a couple of acquaintances had told me that they had sent him the book, which was so nice of them. They were friends of, or they are friends of Stephen, and they said, hey, you should really read this book. So early in the summer, I was kind of sitting around with my fingers crossed, hoping that he would read it, because the book came out June. Geez, when did my book come out? It was like June 4th or something like that. So it was like late to mid-October. I didn't think it was going to happen. So I was in my house moving furniture around, actually. And I was just kind of cranky because I was lifting heavy things. I don't like to lift heavy things if I can avoid it. It was hot, and then my phone just started blowing up, and I saw it. I'm not ashamed to say that I got emotional. Like this was the guy that, never mind, me becoming a writer, I started falling in love with reading because of Stephen King. So I stopped what I was doing. I poured myself a couple of fancy beers that I happened to have in the fridge, and just sat in front of the computer and just reveled in it for a couple hours.
Yeah, I don't blame you. That had to have been a great feeling.
Yeah. No, and I've since been able to exchange a few emails with him. And he's a very nice guy. Yeah, and he recommended a few books. He recommended that I read Sarah Waters' The Little Stranger, because he said that like Head Full of Ghosts to him was like one of his favorite books since that one. And I think her novel does an amazing job of playing with sort of the ghost story and ambiguity, etc. So when he told me to read that book, of course I had to, and I did.
I'm not surprised to hear that he's a nice guy. He certainly comes across that way, So.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
I'm going to say, to get back to the Lovecraftian angle in your book,
Sure.
you make references to two Lovecraftian entities.
Mm-hmm.
One is Athasoth, who was one of the most well-known, and the other was a creation of Walter C. DeBille's called Yidra.
Right.
Any particular reason why you wanted to have a reference to Yidra?
I was, to be honest, it didn't come to my head right away. I was just sort of fishing around through the Cthulhu-esque universe looking for a female sort of demon, for lack of a better phrase. So, when I stumbled across that, I thought that was sort of like a good fit to play with. And, Azathoth, I'm probably not saying it right, I'm terrible with pronunciations, but, that there's obviously a reference, there's only a few letters difference between that and a demon that's referenced, in other religions too. So I thought that was sort of a fun one to play with as well.
Yeah, you do mention Azarel.
Right.
Which is, and yeah, that is similar. I've noticed that too.
Paul, you mentioned several times that kind of a skeptical brain, definitely with you there, was, and in reading the book, well, I guess I should phrase it this way. Did Father Waverly, I think his name, doesn't come off very well. Was
No.
part of the book sort of an indictment against that kind of thinking or religion, or did you mean it that way? Or talk about that a bit.
No, absolutely. I did want it to be a criticism of the Catholic Church and how it certainly treated women in general, but also, given the the hundreds of years history of exorcisms when they have been performed, and and in the olden days when they were performed on unfortunately, mentally ill patients. And that's what I believe. I don't believe people are actually possessed. So, that was certainly a big thing running through it. At the same time, I tried to work really hard for the whole book to allow people to believe that something supernatural did happen. They could build a case for that, or to allow readers to believe that there was nothing supernatural going on at all, and they could build an equally compelling case for that.
Marjorie asks the priest a bunch of, to his mind, annoying questions, and starting them a lot of them with the words, how do you know? Which is probably the most annoying thing you can ask to certain types of people, because because I know is usually the answer, or because I have faith. So, I highlighted some of it, which is how I know I really like a book, when I'm doing a lot of highlighting
Oh,
in my
cool.
Kindle. So, uh, after you perform the exorcism, she says, how did you know the demon wasn't still in there hiding? How do you know it didn't go into a hibernation state, quieting down to come out later, years and years later, when no one would be around to help? How do you know if the wrong spirit left? What if you expelled the person's real spirit and only the demon spirit was there to take its place? If I believed in any of that stuff, I'd be afraid that was going to happen to me. So I thought that was very, very interesting. So
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I feel like both parts are like, if you do believe in that, those can be legitimate questions. Like, if you believe that there is something supernatural here, how do you know? How do you know they're doing the right thing? Uh, but also at the same time, if you're approaching it from a skeptical place, I mean, that's sort of the logic road that you can sort of travel down that rabbit hole. I don't know. I'm glad it worked. Those are just the sort of the things that I thought the 14-year-old me, if I was in that position, would ask.
yeah, and it does touch on the theme of misogyny in Christianity and in other religions.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing, as somebody who was raised as a Catholic, about exorcism
hmm
was after the Vatican Councils in the 60s, there was a movement to totally de-emphasize the devil. And Stephen King mentions this in Salem's Lot, too.
Mm.
That, we're not going to make reference to the devil anymore. He's more of a representation of man's evil. And we're not going to do that. And I was born in 1955, so when I was high school in around 1970, I was getting that from my theology teacher. And then all of a sudden, this book by William Peter Blatty comes out, The Exorcist, which is a great recruitment for the Catholic faith. If you've read the way exorcism is treated there, which is different from the way you've treated it.
Well, but see, I've read also that a lot of filmmakers and authors love to use the Catholic Church in this setting because of the ritual and the imagery, incense, robes, icons, saints,
Right.
that
Right.
it just lends itself to story painting, as it were. Whereas for something boring like Unitarianism, it'd be like, man, I'm going to put the reader to sleep with that one. With all dyed Easter eggs and painted pagan symbols on them, and
Oh, sure. I mean, the reference to ritual. I mean, it's almost hardwired at this point to make you then believe that there's something else going on, right? The beautiful robes and everything else that you mentioned. I don't know. I feel like it just puts you in the mind of something otherworldly can happen or is happening. Yeah, it's funny. I read you're talking about the Blatty novel coming out. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that in the '60s they were de-emphasizing the devil. Because I just read Ray Russell's The Case Against Satan for the first time. I don't know if any of you have read that. It came out like 8 years before Blatty, and I guess I've been told that there was some issues behind the scenes that the Russell camp wasn't happy with Blatty's book coming out with some of the similarities that they do have. But a lot of the discussion in the Ray Russell book is a priest who doesn't believe in the devil, and this other priest is telling him, well, that means you can't really believe in God if you don't believe in the devil. And a lot of it is just sort of like this interesting, theological give and take between, can you have God or, can you have Catholicism without the concept of the devil?
I saw in another interview where you were talking about the older daughter, and you said something to the effect of you hope that readers saw her as a tragic figure and not as an evil figure. And I don't want to give anything away in the book, but
Sure.
I wanted to tell you personally that from the very beginning of the book, I personally really hated the parents, especially the dad, and felt really sorry for the older daughter, regardless of what's really going on.
Yeah.
So,
No, I mean that's what I'm glad that's where you go. I mean, I hoped, I didn't want to make her a caricature, I wanted to ultimately show, and even the whole family. Obviously, the dad, doesn't do great things, but hopefully, I put enough in there for his sort motivation as to, he's doing what he's doing because he thinks he's doing what's best. I mean, I really wanted to try to make it so, there's this thing that's happening with Marjorie, and everything else happens really gets put upon the family. And obviously the family themselves, the mommy and the dad both make poor decisions that don't make anything easier. And to me, that's the horror of the novel. Like everything that they do, every decision that they make ends up snowballing and making everything worse, everything worse, everything worse.
Right, to where they can't really even get out of it because of the past decisions they've made.
Right. And sometimes some of the stuff that happened to them is clearly not their fault, but some of it was, and sometimes that line is blurry. But the end result was, obviously the family tragedy that happened.
Yeah, I think that's one of the scariest things that people can say is I thought I was doing the right thing, and then this horrible thing happens because of it.
Sure. Yeah.
So, tell the audience about the song "Gloomy Sunday" in the book.
Yeah. So, is it Hungarian composer? Someone's going to correct me.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, this song that was composed in the early 20th century, that it's supposedly it's almost back then it was the equivalent of an urban legend. And people who had listened to it had killed themselves. Like a number of people would listen to it because it's such a sad song or sort of a gloomy tune, and it's yeah. I mean, if you search it out on the internet, you're going to find a lot of references to it, and actually a wonderful rendition by Billie Holiday of the song as well. So that idea just sort of fascinated me, especially at the beginning. I just wanted to try. There's a part in the book where Marjorie, and this isn't giving anything away, where she mentions, or actually maybe it's her sister who says it, mentions, maybe she was taking over by, the horrible monster that's pop culture. Like all these different influences are sort of crushing on her. So I really wanted to try to bring in from as many different, fields as possible, including the song. And I used the song as, how did she just start humming it? Well, how did she start humming this song that's almost 100 years old? It's a supernatural event. Or no, wait a minute, maybe
or she knows how to Google.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Well, I actually had not heard of the
song.
Yeah, I actually had not heard of the song myself before reading about it in the book, and right away I Googled it. And
yeah.
Is this something that an urban legend that Paul created, or is this a real thing? And it's always neat when you're incorporating a real thing like that.
I think I have to admit, I first heard of the song, and before I even thought of writing this book, on like a really cheesy reality TV, like fact or fiction, kind of show that was either on the History Channel or Sci-Fi Channel about the song, like, moving people to commit suicide. That's why I heard about the song.
Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
Are the children's books in the novel real or your own creations?
Although, yeah, those are definitely real. Richard Scarry's is it Cars and Trucks That Make Things Go? Man, I'm so terrible with titles. Oh, yeah, it's a real book. I read it as a kid, and I read it to both my kids. We had a fun time searching out Goldbug. And, there is a part in that book where there's a molasses truck, which is just so odd, that spills and everything gets sticky. And the molasses flood in Boston is one of, the oddest, to me, sort of local, I don't want to say tales because it actually happened, but it's one of the oddest sort of occurrences that I'd ever heard of.
Yeah, when I read that, I thought, okay, now Paul's making this up. This has got to be made up, but it's not.
Yeah, no, like a few years earlier, I'd read, because there was a big story in the Boston Globe about this local guy who'd written a book about the molasses accident in the North End. And it's a really good read called Dark Tide. And besides the molasses accident, which in and of itself is horrific and interesting, which is sort of weird to say, but it's also a lot about Boston around 1917, 1918, how it was dealing with, the Spanish flu from the year before had really decimated the North End, and in the collapse of the molasses bin, or not bin, but the collapse of whatever was holding the molasses at first was blamed on anarchists. At the time, the country was really sort of as paranoid as we are about terrorists as they were about anarchists. Everything was being blamed on, these Italian anarchists or other European anarchists. So, again, history always just sort of repeating itself, but it's a very interesting read called Dark Tide. the Dark Tide.
So I used that Google thing on you, and I came across, speaking of the internets,
Oh
and I
no,
came
something
across,
horrible.
it was actually something very funny,
Yeah.
a video that you made dealing with bad reviews. That's on YouTube.
Yeah, I do. That is a fun video. I did that for my first novel. Sorry, you were going to say something about it, or?
No, no, no. Go
Yeah.
right ahead. I'm actually wondering what prompted you to create it, because it's a very funny video.
Well, so this is when The Little Sleep is coming out. This is my first, novel coming out with a big publisher, Henry Holt. So I was trying to come up with ideas of how to promote it. So I came up with the idea because even though it was my first novel, I had short stories out in one short story collection, so I wasn't foreign to the idea of getting good reviews or bad reviews and sort of how you deal with it. So I thought I would make a funny video about how to deal with good reviews and bad reviews in my own way. And obviously, for those who haven't seen it, I smashed the bad reviews and framed the good ones. It was a lot of fun to shoot. I shot it with my brother, who was living in a quasi farmhouse at the time. So we had good fun shooting that.
Well, and making fun of yourself a bit too. When you in part of the video, you're talking about, I don't really pay any attention to the reviews, the good reviews, and then your brother goes to the fridge and the good reviews are hanging on the fridge.
Yeah. It doesn't get easier with each book. I'd be lying if I said I didn't go on Goodreads or Amazon just to see. I definitely don't read every review, but usually when the book first comes out, I do. Then I get to a point like, what are you doing to yourself? You got to stop reading every review because it's just unhealthy. But at the same time, you kind of have to do it. You just want to see what some people are saying and what people aren't saying. And I try not to beat myself up about it too much because it's a natural thing, but at the same time, it can be poison to you. And you really should only do it in small doses, and certainly not interact with anyone that gave you a bad review.
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, there's no way that usually ends well. So.
No. I mean, if someone comes on Twitter and sends me a direct message, then that's fair game. But I'm not going to actively go on Goodreads as someone who posted a review and say something. Which actually, someone coming on Twitter actually happened to me last week. This guy signed up for Twitter expressly to send me like a jab, which I thought was kind of cool.
Jeez, yeah, that's how you know you've made it.
Yeah, he had said, "Dude, didn't you know there were no cell phones in the year 2000?" And blah blah blah.
There weren't.
Well,
I think there were.
The book took place 15. Mary is being interviewed 15 years from now-ish.
Yeah.
Which I didn't make totally explicit, but the idea that the reality show is happening while finding Bigfoot's on, etc. That hopefully that was enough for people to figure out that it wasn't the year 2000.
Yeah, no, I did catch that, and obviously the trolled it. And so.
The Pope Francis references.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. There's a big part in the blog talking about Pope Francis and his supposed performance of an exorcist in public.
I take it that's not true, guys. Rick or Paul?
No, there's a YouTube video of him. Part of it, it's sort of like a clickhole headline because he's just walking by someone in a wheelchair and it looks like he sort of blesses him, etc. But the story is that this person has been suffering from possession for a long time. So people are claiming that he did this basically quick and dirty exorcism out in public.
Mm.
Yeah, because I said when I was reading it, I was going, "Is this really 15 years ago? When was SpongeBob SquarePants on?" And then I'm going, "Well, the Pope. Well, okay, it said it is. The later scenes are set in the future."
Right. Yeah. It's funny. In the early drafts, I was a little bit more explicit, but I ended up cutting out a bit in the second interview with Mary and Rachel, the author, when she goes to her South Boston apartment. I do leave in a little bit about how Mary talks about how they have these seasonal flooding issues now in South Boston, so she doesn't have a car. She doesn't keep it in the garage. And in the first drafts, I talked about how that was because of global warming, whatever year it happened to be. But I took that sort of explicitness out. There's still a reference to seasonal flooding, but at the same time, I don't know. I kind of enjoy that some people are having a hard time with the timeline, because to me that just builds into the whole, confusion, ambiguity of what's going on. Does this feel like out of time? Is this in time? I don't know. To me, that would work for a horror novel, as long as it doesn't annoy people too much.
No, I think it worked well, and I truly did enjoy A Head Full of Ghosts, Paul.
Thanks, Mike.
Wonderful book. What I don't want to keep you too long, but before we let you go, do you have any advice out there for aspiring writers? I read another interview where you talked about spending far too much time worrying about what other writers are doing or not doing, or they're making it versus not making it. Just whatever you want to talk about.
Sure. So in that interview, so my first novel that came out with Henry Holt was The Little Sleep, and I was supposed to write a sequel for it, which I did, even though I wasn't planning on writing any sequels for the detective novel. When that book came out, the publisher didn't put any muscle behind it. The first week the book was out, Amazon had taken all of Macmillan's books off their shelves because they were fighting with Macmillan. So the first week my second novel was available. You couldn't get it on Amazon, which didn't help. So things didn't end well with Henry Holt. It was just very disappointing. I felt like they didn't really support me or push me, and there were a lot of mistakes made, which I think every author feels on some level. So part of it was just me being just really sort of, I let that whole process get to me a little bit too personally than I should have. So it really messed with me for a few years. Like I let it affect my writing. I was upset and patently jealous of other writers who were having success, and it didn't help me as a writer. I didn't really get anything done for another year or two because all my energies were sort of focused in the wrong direction. So when I finally got over that, it was really around the time of starting to write A Head Full of Ghosts, when I finally sort of let that stuff go, that I could actually do, the work that I should have been doing again. So, it's hard. It's certainly natural to be jealous of other people's success, and you can allow yourself to feel that for a little bit, but you can't dwell on it. I don't know. I just try to, if I ever feel like that, I call John Langan, who's like the most positive guy in the world.
Yes.
He's just always so supportive of everybody, and so passionate, enthusiastic about the type of stuff that we all like to read. So talking to my good friend John is always a good boost, and helps to remind the idea that, especially in our genre, whenever someone having success, I do think the idea of, all rising oceans raise all boats idea of, someone else's success is only going to help, somebody else down the line.
I think that no matter what you're doing, that's such an important and sometimes hard lesson to learn, that life is not a zero-sum game, and
right.
Someone else's success doesn't mean now there's that much less success out in the world that you can grab, that you can try to attain.
No, absolutely. The only other writing advice I have, it's hard to give because every writer is so different, so I feel like it's tough to have like blanket advice.
Yeah.
But it works for me. It sort of builds into the review thing. Is as a writer, you're going to get criticism, whether it's a review or your editor or a rejection. You got to give yourself 24 hours if you need to. Give yourself 24 hours just to be, a whiny, mopey jerk about it, to yourself. And then usually, once 24 hours pass, you can be a little bit more rational about the criticism. If it is from an editor, you can decide. Usually, after the 24 hours of, being just self-indulgent, you can decide, hey, maybe there's some merit here. Or you're a little bit more objective, you can say, no, they might have a point here, or you can find a place of compromise. I feel like the same thing works with, if you were to get like a bad review from a publication that you respect, is you can be upset about it for 24 hours, but then that's it. You get to stop after that.
Right. A Head Full of Ghosts, there's a possibility it'll be made into a movie, right?
Yeah, fingers crossed. It was optioned by Focus Features May of last year, and the production companies Allegiance Theater and Team Downey, Robert Downey Jr.'s production company, are working on it. So there are two screenwriters working on it as we speak. They're really nice guys. I talk to them on Twitter. It's so 21st century to say frequently. So we'll see. I have no contractual say in what happens.
Right.
But the screenwriters have been very kind and like sort of keeping me in the loop, and I think they're pretty close in being ready to hand it into Focus. So that'll be the big hurdle, is once they turn in a screenplay, if Focus likes it, I assume everything will start moving forward.
So, what does that mean? Does that mean that Iron Man read the book at some point and he liked it and said, "Go for try and buy this," or how does it work? How does that work
Yeah,
exactly?
from what I understand, well, Allegiance Theater was in on it first, and Allegiance Theater has made movies like Up in the Air, that George Clooney movie, and they actually made Money Monster, which is coming out soon. I don't know if you've seen any ads for that, but it's another George Clooney film with Jodie Foster directing it. So anyway, somehow Allegiance Theater got hold of the book, and they really liked it, and I had conversations with them, and Allegiance had got the two screenwriters on board, and they were going out and pitching it to different people. And I guess it was, from what I understand, that once the Downeys heard about the novel, I guess they were looking for a quote-unquote elevated horror project, whatever that means, I don't know. And I guess they read the book, and within 2 days were like, yeah, we want in. So I think, I don't know if Robert himself read it. I know Susan Downey, his wife, is sort of really important and big in that production company. I know she's working like very closely with the screenwriters. So I was told that they both read it and really liked it, which is cool.
If it does get made into a movie, it'll be interesting to see how they. There's you've got the reality show aspect to it. You've got the 8-year-old point of view, 15 years from now point of view. So it'd be interesting to see how they run with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of things. I would imagine that they probably would lose one of those things potentially. I mean, not the 8-year-old, obviously, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Because you really can't do the blog part of it, which in the book to me is super important. I was prepared to fight tooth and nail for the blog in the book form.
I was thinking of how they might do it, and they could juxtaposition what's actually happening with what the reality show is showing.
Yeah,
which would be
it'd be cool.
And whether that was, and maybe have somebody talking about it later saying, oh, that was a special effect. That really didn't happen.
Yeah, no, I would love that. I had sort of envisioned now maybe like instead of the blogger character, there's someone who makes YouTube videos and, and doing sort of what you said. You can have like the audience is watching a YouTube video where they have clips from old movies and comparing it to, the TV show, etc. But yeah, I don't know if they're going to go in that direction.
Well, I hope that happens. Again, it's a head full of ghosts. If you haven't read it, definitely do. And your upcoming book, in June the 21st, I think you said, is Disappearance at Devil's Rock.
Props.
Hey, let me put you back. Okay, yeah, hold those up again. There you go. Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and that's in June, right?
Yeah, for those of you on Kindle, yeah, I would say the Head Full of Ghosts is like $1.99 on Kindle right now for I think another week or so.
That's right, and not only that, but the the digital audio or Audible version is only $3.99.
Oh.
So they're both really, really great deals. So
yeah, the paperback for A Head Full of Ghosts comes out May 10th, and they actually let me do like a bunch of extras for it, which is really cool. So I wrote like a liner notes, like you would for a DVD, where I talk about like some of the references and where they came from. I don't give away everything, but I talk about because all the character names come from either other writers or characters from other books that I enjoy. So I talk about that, among other things. They also let me include an essay that I wrote for Nightmare Magazine about the politics of horror, and then they had me write a list of my favorite possession movies as well, or possession stories, I should say. So there's a lot of extras in the paperback that should be fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if they'll incorporate those into, or I don't know if you know, will they incorporate those into the Kindle version? So you can update Kindle books, and then the owner gets an email.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
To that effect.
That's a good question. I know that the Kindle versions right now that you buy right now actually has an excerpt of Devil's Rock in it. Disappearance of Devil's Rock.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
It does.
Yeah.
No, I'll find out.
I just have one question. Can you tell us what your most favorite possession story is?
My most favorite possession.
You have a list, obviously.
Yeah.
One of them.
I do enjoy The Exorcist, definitely. Obviously, it's really sort of the urtext for my book. But I guess a more recent film that I think is sort of a sneaky possession movie that people necessarily don't think of it as a possession movie, but Session 9.
Oh, great movie.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies, and I grew up in Beverly, Massachusetts, and that movie was filmed at Danvers State Hospital, mental hospital, which when I was a kid was running. And that was sort of the joke when you're in high school. It's like, hey, where are you going to college? I'm going to Danvers State. So it was just so cool to see that big, amazing, terrifying looking, building, the boogeyman from my youth, up on
Well,
the screen.
did you watch the? I don't remember if it was on the DVD commentary because I watched Session 9 like I remember when it came out, but it seems like at least 8 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, it
That I
came out in
watched
2000 or
on
2001, I think.
Okay, then that sounds about right. So I watched
Yeah.
it on DVD. I watch most of my movies digitally now, but I seem
Yeah.
to remember either on the commentary or a special on the DVD or something, the actors talking about being up on the roof during shooting and hearing voices telling them to jump, things like that. Aren't there a lot of urban legends about that around that place?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they tore part of it down and they tried to turn it into condos, and apparently those burned down like right away.
Mm.
They had to rebuild from scratch. So there are currently condos on the footprint of the old hospital, but I mean, it was also a mess. I mean, like they let out more than half of the inmates in the 80s when Reagan, sort of decertified or whatever law it was that was enacted, where that's sort of like the start of the homeless problem, or not the homeless problem, but that's when the homeless problem or
Didn't
the homeless
help, that's
population
for sure.
exploded in the 80s just because they sort of deregulated so many of these mental hospitals, and they were left with nothing to do but open up their doors and let out,
Well,
so many
I
people who had nowhere
gotta
to
say,
go.
I gotta say, that was done with the best of intention.
Sure, yeah.
That these people were being held essentially against their will. They were effectively imprisoned.
Right.
All these great medications that were going to control their symptoms, and they would be integrated into a welcoming society. And what we ended up with was a lot of crazy people shouting under bridges because
right.
So it wasn't. It was with the best of intentions.
As many horrific things
Right.
are
Kind of like
done.
this show.
Kind of like this show, is that what you said? Yeah, that is a very, very, very creepy movie, Session 9. I'm wondering, since you're such a fan of that ambiguity in horror, have you seen Absentia?
I haven't seen Absentia yet. No.
You should check it out.
Is that the Ethan Hawke film?
No, it's directed by Mike Flanagan.
Okay.
Yeah. Who's starting to get quite a bit bigger, but I can't remember what right now the titles of the other things he's directed.
He directed Oculus.
That's it.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah.
So before I forget, otherwise, possession stories, novel-wise, Sarah Grant's Come Closer is excellent. It's a short novel too. It's only like a couple hundred pages, but that's a very good, possession novel story. I think in the book, in my sort of essay, I mentioned John Langan's novella from his The Wide Carnivorous Sky, Mother of Stone, which is a really sort of unique take and unique perspective on a possession story as well.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Paul. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
No, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, all you have to do to get out of here is just close your browser window, and then the torture is over. So.
All right. Well, thanks
for being
meeting
here,
everybody. Sure.
Bye.
Good to see you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Good luck with the new novel.
What's that?
I was just saying, good luck with the new novel. It sounds interesting.
Larry Barron's got his book is out now, A Man with No Name. So it just came out Friday, I think it was. So if anybody out there hasn't picked up on that yet.
Was that the short story you had in The Mountain Walked?
Yes, I believe that's right. So, which probably 200 people have read up until this was published, because the first edition of A Mountain Walked, Centipede Press, was just, what was it, $10,000 or something like that?
Something like
$200. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not been reprinted in the Dark Regions Press version. So, but yeah, it's a novella. So, let's see, what else is going on? When's your next issue of Strange Eons, Kelly?
Oh, it'll be summer. We haven't decided on a lot, and Justin just sent me a new I'm totally unprepared for this question. Way to go. Justin Steele, our fiction editor, just sent me a new story that he had accepted for it. So we've got another 3 pieces of fiction. I think that's probably going to be our standard now. It's 3 pieces of fiction, and a couple of comics, and then articles and interviews like we normally do. But I can't remember who any of them are right now. Off the top of my
No,
head.
that's all right. I put you on the spot. And then for anyone listening or watching that, if you're a gamer, there are a hell of a lot of Lovecraftian games coming up. I linked to this on the Lovecraft eZine Facebook page this week, but this website's onlysp.com, and they listed 8. Call of Cthulhu, which is, I guess, I need to talk to Sandy Peterson about this, but I guess it's an official adaptation of the role-playing game. It's going to be a video game, so it looks really good. Same people that did Sherlock Holmes: The Awakened, real popular PC game. They're creating a Lovecraftian game called The Sinking City. The player will assume the role of a private investigator in 1920s New England, go figure, where a supernatural disaster has flooded the city, causing its inhabitants to crumble onto the brink of madness. And speaking of madness, the next game on the list is At the Mountains of Madness. They're doing one of those. Moons of Madness. Currently hoping to be greenlit via Steam, Call of Relay is a first-person exploration game heavily based on the Cthulhu mythos. Not much is known about the game so far, other than part of it will be set in the sunken city of Relay. So, Edge of Nowhere. Now, Oculus Rift game. I don't know much about Oculus Rift. And a couple of others. So, there's a lot of Lovecraftian games in the works. So then, Rick, do you know about this new?
One more Lovecraftian game, Mike.
What's that?
There's one more Lovecraftian game to comment on. It's not in the realm of electronics, but it's from the pen of Sandy Peterson. The popular Pathfinder, I don't know if you want to say derivative of D&D. He is creating a Cthulhu Mythos supplement book to run in Pathfinder worlds. He's currently having a Kickstarter, and if you support at the appropriate level, it comes with a lot of cool miniatures you can use in your campaign.
All the miniatures are from the Cthulhu War.
But they're really mini, aren't they? I don't think they're the same size.
They were the same images from what I saw.
Yeah, but I thought they were going to be this miniature size. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
It would be very hard to make a deep one smaller than the deep one that's in Cthulhu War. But I was looking. It wasn't all the figures, but you got like something like 7 deep ones, and the Migo, and some of the great old ones. Not every one. And there was some from the first wave of Cthulhu Wars, and there was some from the second wave.
Well, I sent Sandy an email like 3 days after he started it, and I wrote, "Well, I hope you're successful." Oh, never mind. He funded it in like an hour or something. So
everything he touches seems to turn to gold. I gotta say. So.
Well, interestingly enough, though, his first Kickstarter failed. He was talking to me about that a couple of years ago, and it was right before he did Cthulhu Wars. Well, a few months before he did the Cthulhu Wars, and it was some sort of Lovecraftian electronic game. I think it was for iPhone or Android. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it was. And then he found his way to Cthulhu Wars, and and there's Matt with his Cthulhu Wars figures.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you have those. You have them fight each other.
We'll have to have another conversation about you playing with your Cthulhu Wars action figures on the show.
You either have them fight each other, or you just look at them and look at the detail for hours. you know, one thing, if you want to get into anatomy,
And who doesn't?
I don't want to get dirty, but you can figure out how Nyarlathotep goes to the bathroom if you look closely at it.
God.
And it's true of a lot of the figures.
And Sandy, he gives the thumbs up on everything, you know. So apparently this has crossed his mind. Do you guys know about this? Lost H.P. Lovecraft work commissioned by Houdini.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay, there's actually a very good blog by S.T. Joshi where he addresses it, and it's not as lost as they're making it out to be.
Okay, talk about that then.
Well, I read his blog once, but he had written a synopsis of the work for publication. What I'll do is I'll find the blog entry and link it to the message board. Well, it's perhaps not as well known. I actually...
Oh, I just pulled it up.
More interesting than that, I thought those... these were actually thought lost. Those pictures that Lovecraft himself sketched of architecture in Charleston, South Carolina, for a little pamphlet he was writing about a trip to Charleston. I think they were thought gone, and I don't know if she's a graduate student, a PhD, a historian, or just an enthusiast, discovered the pamphlet and has reproduced the images. I had put them on the eZine message board at the beginning of the week, I think.
Okay, I must have missed that. I'll check that out.
I'll go ahead and do that again, but it's like Lovecraft wasn't a bad artist, you know?
So, I pulled up Joshi's blog. I'm reading a Guardian article about this. There were a lot of articles. Below the headline, manuscript for the Cancer of Superstition, requested shortly before somebody's death, is discovered in a collection. Long lost manuscript by H.P. Lovecraft, an investigation of superstition through the ages that the author was commissioned to write by Harry Houdini, has been found in a collection of magic memorabilia. But then flipping over to Joshi's blog, there's been much talk lately about the discovery, he's got discovery in quotes, of a Lovecraft manuscript called The Cancer of Superstition, which he was ghostwriting for Harry Houdini. Let's see what he has to say about it. Synopsis was apparently written by Lovecraft and August Derleth. They say that the actual chapters were written by Edie, so C.M. Edie, Jr. So, quoting Joshi's blog, I'm not at all sure that we should be all agog about the discovery of a new Lovecraft text when in fact it may be by someone else. So I guess that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
So. Alright, so what other news do we have? Anything else? Oh, Mike Griffin's got a new book. I wanted to throw that out there. The Lure of the Devouring Light by Michael Griffin, sorry.
Has that been released yet?
No, it's available in pre-order. Looks like an April 30th release date. So.
Did Joe Pulver get his travel arrangements? Did he get are they make enough money on the Kickstarter for him to go?
They made enough money, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
that's super.
yeah, he's going. So. You're not going, are you, Matt?
Yeah, I've got. I took the time off and I got a ticket.
Oh, good. I didn't realize.
The big deal is.
No, you did tell me that. Sorry, go ahead.
It's kind of expensive to fly from Peoria, Illinois to Santa Barbara, so I flew into L.A. thinking it was right around the corner, and it's like a 100-mile drive. So I'm going to have to rent a car like at 8:30 at night or 9 at night and drive to there at 11 o'clock at night, check in, and I'll be a basket case. The Monday that I'm leaving, I have to leave the hotel at 3 in the morning. It's like,
oh wow,
how stupid can you get? Oh my God, I should have got the more expensive ticket.
What? Is that next weekend?
No, it's the end of April.
End of April. Okay.
What day are you arriving, Matt?
If the thing starts on Friday, I am getting into town Thursday. But Thursday, so late that I'm going to be useless to anybody. But I think the convention itself is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I'm leaving Monday, but Monday extremely early in the morning.
So, Kelly, any tips on submitting to Strange Eons or other magazines or anthologies? Any tips on what not to do?
Oh, let me just Google that for you, Mike, like
Wouldn't you?
a regular writer would do. I think you're bringing up the fact that we had a.
I'm not bringing
interesting
anything up. I don't know. I'm just asking a question. Come on, man.
Well, let me convey a little story then. We had an
Okay.
interesting cat submit to the magazine, and we're an invitation-only magazine. So he first contacted me through the Facebook page and asked if we were open for submissions. So I sent him to the submissions page on the actual website for the magazine, which is probably where any
Good place
writer
to
should
go.
look
Yeah.
for any publication they're looking to submit to. And it clearly states that for fiction, we are invitation only. We are open for submissions for comics or art. So
Hang
he
on.
then,
I'm writing down go to submissions page before. All right, go ahead. I've got that.
so then he sent me another message on the Facebook message site asking how he would acquire an invitation, and I explained to him that our fiction editor was Justin Steele, and that he could send a email to the submissions email right there on the page, and
The guy's a total jerk, so good luck, right?
and query and let him know where he could see some work of yours, so that he could decide whether you were right for the magazine. I told him, he asked if he could send some attachments along. I asked him explicitly not to do that. So the next thing that showed up was an email with a bunch of attachments and submissions, and Justin
And
turned them down immediately,
Poetry, right?
because he was aware that, yeah, there was some poetry in there, some dark verse. And then
It's not poetry, it's dark verse.
the guy kind of went off on Justin and called him an arrogant sod, which I love a little bit, and that might be what's underneath. That might be Justin's new title at the magazine, actually. Nick Gucker is our head art creep, and so Justin Steele might be arrogant sod.
Yeah, he's.
So does that mean he was British, this man?
I don't want to give anything away and make people look him up or anything like that. Although I have become fascinated with him, and I've read everything he's written right now, and it's awful. But you can take what you will from the term arrogant sod and maybe figure out if he was British or not, I suppose.
And of all people to call an arrogant sod.
He could always be
Yeah.
Canadian.
This is true. He could be Canadian.
Could be Canadian.
He wasn't Canadian. I'm just saying that right now. I love the Canadians.
Yeah,
I'm
those
just pointing
those
out
people
that
are
somebody
jerks.
uses a word common in the British Isles. Could be that you're from a colony.
He could be Canadian. They're very hot-tempered up there, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
I live right on the border, and those guys are just jerks. I'm watching them build the wall right now to keep us all out when Trump gets elected.
are they paying for it?
Yeah, they'll build a wall and they'll pay for it themselves.
That's right. Happy to be.
Yeah, they're planning ahead. All right. Well, we have anything else to talk about?
I just wanted to mention that, as some of you know from previous shows, I'm a big fan of a movie, Dark Intruder.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered it's available on an official DVD release. You can buy it on Amazon. It's being released it was released in December by Turner Classic Movies, and it's on a double bill with The Night Walker, a thriller with a screenplay by Robert Bloch.
Wow.
The Night Walker.
Yeah. That was a 1960s movie which deals with whether dreams are real.
Interesting.
Yeah, when's that Dark Intruder article? When and where is that going to be republished?
Oh, it'll be in a magazine called Monster. I don't know the date of when it's coming out. It's going to be in the next issue, but I don't have a date. But you can read it online on Lovecraft eZine.
Yeah.
No, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh, they probably have subscribers, I'm assuming. That.
Yeah, I know. It will be published alongside another article, which would probably go more deeply into the film from a production standpoint. Because I just dealt with the Lovecraftian screenplay, just what came from stories in the mythos and so forth, and tracking down there were some weird references to gods from Mesopotamia that it was impossible to find for years.
Dark Intruder, that's the one with Leslie Nielsen, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's kind of appropriate that it's on a double bill with a Robert Bloch movie because the screenwriter was Barry Lyndon. And he had adopted some of Bloch's stories for Alfred Hitchcock and Thriller TV shows. And that movie is one of the adaptations was for Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper. And you can see elements of Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper in Dark Intruder. And there's another, he also borrows from a Bloch story that was never adopted called The Mannequin.
Mm. There's a movie called Black, I don't know when it's going to be released, but a movie called Black Mountainside. The creators sent me password protected Vimeo. It's on, I mean...
Are you ever going to do a movie night again, Mike? I used to enjoy those.
Yeah. We haven't done that in a while, have we? It's always real popular. Got to figure out what movie to ask a director if I can show. Maybe Black Mountainside, if they'll let me.
That would be kind of neat.
Yeah, I'll watch it this week and then ask them and see if they'd be interested. Who are you talking to, Matt? Matt, you calling Matt an arrogant sod, Kelly?
No, Leslie Nielsen was a Canadian, you know, so he probably was an arrogant sod. And don't call me Shirley.
Well, the odd thing about Leslie Nielsen being a Canadian, just to show you how it was difficult to be a Canadian in Hollywood at times, is that he first, well, one of the most prominent things he did in the early 60s was Swamp Fox on Walt Disney, if you remember.
Was he the one? I did not know that.
He was the American Revolutionary fighting the British. Well, that show got banned in Canada.
Okay.
Because they're all Tories up there, or descended from Tories, which is kind of funny.
All right, well, let's see. We're giving away Weird Shadows over Innsmouth. This is all from Verdogen and Bremer. Weirder Shadows over Innsmouth and Awaiting Strange Gods. Those first two are edited by Steve Jones, and Awaiting Strange Gods is Daryl Schweitzer collection. And if you want one of those three books, just send an email to lovecraftezine@gmail.com, and please put the title of the book in the subject of the email, and I'll do that drawing next week. So thanks to everybody for watching the show and listening to the show. And let's see, next week is, all right, Ellen Datlow. So thanks, guys. We'll see everybody next week.